Hey, it's Friday. Good afternoon, everybody, or evening if you're, east of where I am. We have these things called time zones, and they try to keep our clock somewhat aligned to where the sun is in the sky. And kind of hard to imagine not having time zones, but they're a rather recent occurrence. Something as recent as about 150 years ago, when railroad traffic became a mainstay of transportation and kind of the hub of towns, and they needed to know when these trains would show up, and we had to run a schedule, or at least something close to a pretty tight schedule. And so that ended up allowing us to kind of synchronize our clocks around a common, or let's just say we don't want that one, we want this one, around a standard. And that developed standard time. So that's kind of cool, and certainly something we live with even to this day. All right, yesterday, let's kind of roll on into this because it's Friday and we've all got, I don't want to say better things to do, but there's other things to do. And we talked about this incredible lightning strike yesterday, this one where we had the longest duration of a lightning flash, at least within satellite records, and within, yeah, largely satellite records, because these things happened, and most of them over the ocean. And so obviously we couldn't see them. We couldn't locate them exactly. We could get pretty close, but not exactly, or time them out. That was something that was often missing from lightning data. But within the last 30 years or so, and probably the record is even shorter than that, and maybe significantly so, we've got a pretty good idea that this longest lightning flash in duration of 16 and a quarter seconds, and then in distance of 400 miles. And that was, kind of epic. And so I kind of threw out there that potentially maybe this massive weakening called the South Atlantic Anomaly that's happening in the Earth's magnetic field could be somewhat relevant to what's happening there even right now. And so we don't know for sure, but nevertheless, this event is happening across the South Atlantic, and there's a complementary one that's happening over towards Siberia. So it's not nearly as potent. This one down here has actually even begun to split into two parts. So there is the potential that this has something to do with the Earth's magnetic core and the whisperings, if not outright kind of becoming more present chatter of a magnetic shift. And when that happens, there's a whole other cascade of events that would then fall in line or happen in congruency with. The mainstream press and the mainstream science wants to say that an event like that will happen over decades, if not centuries, whereas we have magma records, Crater Lake National Park or Crater Lake in southern Oregon, where the Earth's field changed as recorded in solidified magma at the rate of 6 degrees per day, meaning that a whole flip could happen inside of 2 months. So there's so many examples where mainstream science says, it's a gradual thing, don't worry about it, it's survivable. But then the record shows that cataclysmic events happen very, very regularly. All right, so we'll pop out of that and then come back to back to Twitter and look at some of the weather highlights that continue around the area. And this is just an epic thunderstorm that hit Custer, South Dakota yesterday. And, I showed one a little while back of hail here in southern Colorado, and it was literally nothing like the drifts of hail that came out of this particular storm yesterday, right at about this time. So that kind of an unreal hailstorm. And if you've got corn that's yay tall, if you've got an alfalfa crop that's either laying in the field ready to be cut, or potatoes that have come up, and no, this kind of hail just shreds them. You reset the clock back to early May and trust that the plants can survive and even reach maturity in time for harvest. So that's a devastating. Nearly able to call your Farm Bureau agent and say, "Hey, dude, you got to come out and do a crop survey. We got to deal with this." All right, the European Medium Range Weather Forecast, the ECMWF, getting a bit more bullish on the idea for a potential tropical cyclone to spawn over the Atlantic's main development region, the MDR, in the coming days. We'll have to watch this one as the track takes potential system towards the U.S. So by this time next Friday, it'll be apparent whether we've got something going on one way or another with these tropical storms. All right, the Weather Channel, once again, kind of stayed in the obvious that an Omega weather pattern will cool off the west, heat up the Midwest, and bring rains and storms to parts of the east next week, with hotter than average weather across the Gulf Coast all the way up into Ontario. And I promise you, in about a day, in about a week's time, that we will see record highs on the edge of the Hudson Bay area. At the same time, it will look at some of these forecast cold record highs sitting over the Mountain West. And of course, wherever you've got cold, you've got to have heat. And then on the other side of that, it's just kind of like this wave train where you end up with ruts in a road and up and down and up and down. And a strong blockage means that same kind of wave pattern is in place upstream and also downstream. The National Weather Service out of North Platte, Nebraska. We've seen hail across the sandhills this evening, yesterday afternoon, with reports as large as ping-pong-sized hail. If you've got reports or photos, please feel free to share with size, location, and time. And you can see the journey that these hailstones take. They drop down, get caught in an updraft, climb up, and then there's this up and down until eventually the hail is propagated outside of the strongest updraft where the gravity takes over, and then the hail is released and then falls off to the ground. So that's kind of the story of hail. Sometimes they're incredibly spiky, looking like, a coronavirus, or they're round and rolled up like this particular one we see here. Brown haze can be seen in the skies over Corpus Christi, Texas, indicating that the Saharan dust has arrived. It has made that journey across the Atlantic, through the Caribbean, up the Gulf of Mexico, and that has crossed into Corpus Christi on the deepest part of Texas. And then kind of some amazing photography, as Wyoming is an incredible place to go storm chasing. It literally looks like I'm seeing a green sign there. And these hills could be probably, and I'm just venturing a guess, knowing Wyoming terrain and having traveled I-90 or I-80 many, many times, that we're west of Laramie in this particular shot. Moved to Colorado, but Wyoming is quite as beautiful as well. So just epic storms. And this one looks like you could literally, as Justin says, capture this monster storm yesterday on I-90 near Salem, South Dakota. Scary looking out west, but it's like you could just drive underneath there and then just get out and touch the thing. All right, goes west. The satellite in place in geostationary orbit out over the Pacific, picking up a few of these tropical storms. Boris likely falling apart and will never even get close to the Hawaiian Islands, and then potential for development off the coast of Central America and off the coast of Mexico. All right, lightning strike running about 50,000 degrees. So I don't want to say obviously, but if you didn't know, that is substantially hotter than the surface of the sun, and these lightning strikes are pretty potent. We talked a little bit about a moment ago up above where we could see the development in the Atlantic, and these are kind of the models let's just pop in there and bring out that big that we could see. Well, the models are generating something beginning in here and then tracing off to the east, and then this being the Lesser Antilles, the Azores, and then the tip of Africa, Dakar being right there. So something we're going to watch, and it is and would be beneath the Saharan dust layer, and that's probably the good news, is that we would see that there and out of sight. So we kind of need to see, I don't want to say that we need to see that, but the conditions are certainly primed to see those kind of storms developing, as there's another Kelvin wave kind of rolling across the Atlantic and will likely trigger some more development. More dust is coming. More is still pouring off Africa. This is not letting go. Will probably run completely through the end of June and relatively deep into July, at least the first 10 days of July, before some kind of a pattern change would affect this dust. And if we think about the big picture, dust in the atmosphere is a huge inhibitor to rainfall, thunderstorm development, rain droplet size development. It's a great condensation nuclei. And the analogy, if you want to go into the geoengineering realm, are the particles left over from the chemtrails. They can overwhelm the atmosphere to where there's just too many of them that we don't see proper cloud development. The other thing is the conductivity of the atmosphere goes through the roof. So the technologies that we already have to play with ionization are far more effective when you have a conducting nuclei, whether it's salt-based, ionized salt, or whether it's sand in the atmosphere. And when the planet goes through a cooling phase, and after a spike in warmth that we've experienced, always, 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 if you study cycles, we see a drop off in temperature. And when the temperature drops off, the oceans have got to release their heat. We go through a reglaciation. The water goes up north. That's just where it's going to migrate, and then on to the higher elevations. But ultimately, the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere comes down, and the amount of precipitation comes down on the whole, and the planet begins a process of desertification. That, in a way, has already begun, but I think, geoengineering is obviously playing into a part of that, but probably not all of it. There's still some natural forces, obviously, at work right now. Nice little vortex playing across northwestern Iowa, and you can see we begin to get a little circulation, a little bit of curl, and this is how these things once formed over the waters, the tropical waters. We can have that huge development. And then second to last picture hangs over Tampa Bay this morning, the layer of Saharan dust. You can begin to see that off to the east. So this dust will continue to surge towards the west and ultimately cover a big chunk of the eastern United States over the next couple of days, and Iceland dealing and enjoying a little bit of the northern lights. So what we've got today, and since we're kind of running a little bit short on time, not that we're ever short on time, but we're kind of running down to that part of it. The heat in the Midwest, we've already got the cool weather formed and brought in by the showers from Colorado through Wyoming into Idaho with the hot. Look at Redding. I believe that's Redding at 111 degrees. So near record heat, almost maxed in there with Havasu City at 111 degrees and Palm Springs at about 108. So very, very hot in those locations, whereas New England cool, and Florida's been hot lately, but largely just driven by the oppressive humidity that's in place. The green indicates, and this is the outline of the United States, where we've got the higher dew points, where the humidity, where the fuel for the storms resides, and that's almost always where you see the intersection with the fronts. And then the nice strong south winds through Texas dragging in dew points that are way into the 80s. So that moisture continues to surge north. Thunderstorms lighting up along the front range of the New Mexican and Colorado and even into southern Wyoming Rockies. Cool in the Mountain West, cool in the Great Lakes states. A little bit closer here on some of the high clouds, and a lot of trails airborne today, and not so much many by the big jets. But I've noticed, because we don't have as many large planes airborne, because there aren't the passengers to fly upon them, that there's a lot of small planes out there doing that work, doing that marking up of the sky, that leaving the trails, seeing which way the atmosphere is flying, that kind of work. I saw a little Cessna Bravo out there today, leaving one overhead, and you look at it at 42,000 feet, and just a little, it's a 7-seater little small jet, but it was out there, and that was a deliberate trail. So there's something definitely on board the fuels that is allowing this to happen. So that's where we're seeing storms today, a little bit closer on the front range, because that's where the big stuff is. From Cheyenne down to Longmont, big boys just rolling through the west side of Denver right now. And then just outside of the Springs, the Santa Lucia Valley, looked like we were going to get something. And then, no, a nice big south wind came in and just literally destroyed the storms that would have provided us with a little bit of rain, but that just apparently wasn't meant to be. The cool weather headed back into the west. That's probably the highlight in record highs, to where by next, what day do we have here? Monday. So 4 days out. Good morning, guys over there, Jane and Fu. It's Friday. Everybody's got something else better to do than sit around and play on Facebook and the likes. But we're seeing forecast highs, crazy, crazy cold, 40, 50, 60 degrees, 53 at Stanley, Idaho. That record, I believe, stands since 1916, that the coolest they have been on the 29th of June is 59 degrees, and the models are predicting them to be 53. So that is just plain straight up cold. So there's more cool weather coming into the west, and that's all due to, and this will be the last chart, that low that drops in from the west, kind of sits out here. But the question always is how far inland or how far into the country does that cool get, especially since we've already got a chilly one over New England? And the answer is not that far. The ridge holds in place, and that'll take the record heat, or at least some very warm temperatures, up towards the Hudson Bay area. But as we play this out, this western trough continues to get recharged. And that, in many ways, is not a bad thing, since the drought is in place and is kind of intense. And then as the ridge amplifies, by the time we get to 10, 11 July, that allows the monsoon to come on into place. And then that becomes the big rain event. And as we've mentioned in the last couple of days, if we're to see some flooding, it'll be in the Mexican mountains, and then also on the front range of the Canadian Rockies, up towards Banff, Nelson, the far eastern part of British Columbia, but more so into the Alberta plains. And that's kind of what's going on. Good morning, guys. Great to see you there. There's a few folks around. And Fridays are always probably our least viewed show, simply because there's other things to do. There's absolutely other things to do, but we always have hashtag replay just to let me know you've been there. And most of the products, if not everything, is going to end up on the MedaDigm Digital YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out or gone over there and subscribed to get notifications when I do go live, we'll probably end up doing 3 shows. I'm already doing another perspective where we kind of take a semi-non-political view of some of the issues that we can face, so we can kind of get our arms around them. Obviously, this weather show. And then the other one, I think, I don't know, kind of what came out yesterday was just we're kind of at a 0 hour for a lot of topics that we have kicked the can down the road for so many things. And we're really approaching the 0 hour for when we need to make decisions about how we're to move forward. And we as a population, in so many ways, have abdicated our responsibilities for doing these things. So seeing the chaos that's happening in the world in many ways is kind of bringing our attention to some of these topics, but there are absolutely no solutions. None of those are being discussed. Just anger is being expressed, or mocked anger and mocked outrage. A lot of it's engineered and funded by people that are very, very wealthy and have a lot to gain by discord in this country. But I kind of want to hit those topics somewhat on 0 hour. All right, that's probably it for the Friday evening. Risa, and there she is. Yeah, hashtag replay, young lady. Because so check out that 0 hour bit that I posted up on the YouTube channel. It's there in a few places. And I want to talk about some of those things in a very kind of relaxed, not a structured kind of way, because I'm just truly amazed that as a nation, with so many media properties, that we haven't been able to get Trump and Biden together to talk about something. That hasn't happened yet. We know they're both the presumptive nominees, so let's begin the discussions. It doesn't have to happen through the press. That's too biased. It's too polarized. Let's just start talking. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us as a country. We've got a lot of work to do. And it's best we not wait until November, and then once that'll just be annoyed at the other if they particularly lose. All right, glad to see you stop by. Hashtag replay, as I mentioned a bit ago, and we'll see you on Monday for another perspective. That will be at 1 o'clock Mountain and 2 p.m. Central Time. All right, everybody, take care. Have a great evening, and enjoy the weekend. Keep looking up.